my Korean church, and I just got made fun of it for it. And I was just, so it's kind of funny to think about, and I think I just laugh it off like it's just ridiculous. But when you're a kid and that's your world, it means a lot. So I never felt like I was accepted to a group until I was in the teams. And for the first time, I was home. And I loved it.
I had to go to college in the middle of my SEAL career, and I was talking to a professor, and I was saying to this professor, well, I've just got to finish this course so I can get back to the teams. And the guy was looking at me like I was completely insane, like I was completely crazy, because the war had started, and I'm saying, I just want to get this so I can get out of here so I can go back to the teams. And he's looking at me like I'm crazy. And he says well, don't you like going to school, and wouldn't you rather just stay here an extra 2 semesters and just go to classes and learn? And I was like, no. I said, I would leave right now. If the Navy would let me, I would leave right now with no degree. I don't care about this. And he's like, why? It was incomprehensible to him. And I sat there and I looked at him and I said, and it sounds really freaking horrible to say this, I guess, if you put it in the view of identity politics. But I look at him and I go, because in the teams, everyone's like me. And I don't mean it that they're like me, that they're white males. I mean they're like me. And it doesn't matter what background they come from. It doesn't matter if they're Korean or Mexican or black or white. It doesn't matter. They're like me. They're going to laugh at the same stupid jokes. They're gonna throw daggers at me that I'm gonna expect to be able to deal with. I'm gonna throw daggers back at them. And if things escalate, they can get out of control, and we'll go toe to toe. That's what happens in the teams, and then we'll shake hands and have a beer. And so that feeling of when you get to a platoon and you're like, oh, thank you, world, because now you put me with these other dudes, and they're like me. And we can take on. It's us against the world, and that's a damn good feeling.
It's a brotherhood, and it's hard to articulate that feeling that you described. But for all those things you said, yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about workup, and the desert training. To me, there's no better way to start off a workup than going through that desert training. It's hard. It was August. It was 120 degrees outside. It was brutal. We were thirsty. We were tired. And we were getting after it.
There's nothing like it. I think I clearly remember that first night, and they were like, let's go on a little patrol.
Little shakeout
patrol. And so guys are like, all right, I'll maybe bring a canteen. I'll bring a liter, maybe half of this Camelback. Or maybe I just won't bring anything. I'll be good. And this shakeout patrol became like an all-night patrol of just marching through in this heat. And it's nighttime, but it's still sweltering hot. And I remember folks just running out of water very early on. I think Ryan Job, I don't even know if he brought any water, and just suffering through it. But things like that stick with you, that kind of mutual suffering and hardship. I'm a firm believer that shared hardship and suffering is one of the best ways to bring people together towards a common goal, to break down barriers, to form a brotherhood, a sisterhood, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what the teams does. And it's, as you mentioned earlier, it's not just what the teams does. Every military unit, when you go through boot camp in the Navy, okay, maybe it's a different kind of hardship, but there's a sleep deprivation, there's a weird food scenario going on, there's tasks that have to be done, there's hammer sessions that take place, like all those things, they're unifying you. And then you go to the next step and you get unified tighter. And then you go to the next, you go to BUD/S, you get unified tighter. Then you show up in a SEAL platoon, and now you're going through a hard workup, and you're going to get unified, even tighter. And it's awesome. Do you, we rolled from there. Other aspects of workup. Was there anything that you were nervous about going through workup? Because you were, and I was going to say this earlier. You said that you were a gray man going through buds, meaning that you weren't great at anything, but you weren't horrible at anything. And that was exactly the same way I was. I wasn't great at anything. I wasn't horrible at anything. I made it through in one shot because I guess I wasn't as good as you, but because I failed a little bit of everything, but not enough of anything to get me rolled. So I might have been on the sadder or weaker side of the gray man. But workup, you know, as the guy that was running it, the only people that showed up on my radar a lot were people that were having problems, and you didn't show up on my radar as having problems. You were pretty much could do everything.
I mean, what I appreciated about the teams was that it was a true meritocracy. You got out of it what you put in. And my original fears of being the medic, of being boxed into just that responsibility, because I wanted to do more. I wanted to be the best asset I could be to my platoon, to my brothers. And I quickly fell under the mentorship of many other people in the platoon. Chris Kyle was the primary sniper, navigator, point man. And new guys kind of get matched up to a person, and he was the person I got matched up to because I would eventually be groomed to take on his responsibilities. So early on, I got tasked with being like the assistant lead nav and point man and sniper, which eventually got to take on these roles more as a primary later in workup and also on deployment. So that responsibility meant so much to me, and I wanted to practice and train and wake up early and make sure, just because I didn't want to mess it up. Not for myself, but because I felt I owed, and I did owe, that responsibility of doing a good job to my platoon.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any greater people talk about motivation. I don't know that there's any greater motivation than I don't want to let my guys down. And whether that's, hey, I know the entire patrol is following me as the point man or as the lead nav. And if I mess this up, I'm taking the whole patrol with me.
To be clear, I messed up plenty of times. and my platoon let me know about it. I messed up plenty of times. But still just trying that never-ending pursuit to be better and to accept responsibility for your failures and promise you will do better.
That's what the workup is. And, we had a great workup. We went hard and in that workup, and eventually we completed the workup. We got ready to go on deployment. And you guys actually went on leave. I don't know if you remember this. We were deploying to Baghdad. That was the plan. And I had actually gone with a couple other guys on pre-deployment site survey and checked out where we were going to be deploying to in Baghdad. We were going to be doing, basic direct action missions, catching bad guys, and pretty straightforward in that Baghdad area. Pretty straightforward deployment was what we were heading for. And everyone went on leave. And during that leave period, I got called in, and I actually don't even know if I took leave, but I was at work, and our boss, our commanding officer, called me in and said, hey, you guys aren't going to go to Baghdad anymore. Actually, he asked me hey, we're thinking about shifting things around. How would you feel about going to Ramadi? And I knew what was going on in Ramadi. We all, I don't know if we all knew, but I definitely knew what was going on in Ramadi. I knew how bad it was. I knew it was the area where the most enemy was and where the most enemy contact was, and where if we were going to fight, that would be the place to go. And, I talked to him and said, yeah, well, we can make those adjustments. And by the time you guys came back in off of leave, we were then going to Ramadi.
Yeah. That decision-making was, I was not aware of that. I was happy being just an E5 shooter. And I do remember that, coming back from leave, we're going to Ramadi, place that I hadn't heard.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you even know the difference? Were you just like, whatever, going to Iraq, I'm happy?
Yeah. I mean, I was, 21, 22. And when I think about, I was just a kid. Like, what I know now, based on what I knew back then, is just crazy. But yeah, to me, I don't think I was aware. I knew it was a bad place. I don't think, obviously not to the same level as you of what was going on, the SIG acts going on at that time.
Yeah, it was. I guess I was probably paying more attention to what was going on there. And actually, Ramadi had been really bad for a while, for a pretty good chunk of time. But it wasn't like the SEAL task unit that was there was really getting after what it didn't look that extraordinary compared to any other task unit that was in Iraq at the time. But I knew it was going to be pretty gnarly going over there, and I also knew that if anyone would be able to do a good job there, I knew that we could do a good job there as a task unit because we had worked really hard. We were firing on all cylinders. As you said, we were an aggressive task unit for sure, and I knew it would be a good environment for us to go into. And one of the things that we were getting ready to leave, and the Commodore, who's a fantastic guy, ended up an admiral, and I had worked for him, and I had a great relationship with him. He's a fantastic guy, but he came to debrief or to brief all of SEAL Team 3 before we went on deployment. And he said something along the lines of, listen, no one in this room is going to shoot their guns on this deployment. Or he said something, maybe not quite that extreme. Something like, chances are there's no one in this room that's going to shoot their guns on this deployment. And, this is just, things are a little less kinetic. So we rolled over there, and needless to say, within the first, I would say 24 hours that the whole task unit was there, the base, our little base got attacked, and the entire task unit, including some of the techs, were up on the rooftop returning fire. And a few days later, that Commodore showed up, and I gave him a hard time. I said, hey, sir, you said no one was going to shoot their weapons. And I said, this entire task unit and most of the techs have actually engaged the enemy at this time. So that was a little welcome aboard.
I remember that night. It was a good welcome. And I remember some of the techs going through like 6 mags, like the first couple of minutes. I'm like, let's slow our roll down. But it was a good, I think it became very clear the situation we found ourselves in. And I agree. I think we were as prepared as we could have been for that situation.
Then how long did it take you after being on the ground? What was the first op you did?
It was DA.
DA, the kind of one, this is the one Leif and I joke about because Leif was like, we're not going to be ready. We should roll it. We shouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. And him and I have talked about this on the podcast, I think, which was, I was like, bro, it's going to be okay. You got this. And he was like, he was nervous, man, because it was his first op in Ramadi. There's mayhem going on. Yeah. And, I just looked at him and said, bro, you got this. It's not going to be that hard. And he was like, Roger. And, he sucked it up and you guys went and executed the op. No big deal, no factor. But it was shortly thereafter that I started looking at a different strategy besides just doing DAs and moving more towards these overwatches. And then we kind of started moving in that direction. Didn't take very long. The brigade commander, like almost out of the gate, asked for our support in areas that were being heavily IED'd where we could go out and start interdicting people that were putting in IEDs. What was that like for you from your perspective as a new guy? What was just tell people about your job, what that was like.
Yeah, so early on in the deployment, I was we had a lot of snipers, and the way the teams work, since I'm sure you've said on previous podcasts, everyone has multiple jobs. We overlap responsibilities